The love has to be concrete. So if you're, doing all the things, affirming people, holding them in high regard, you can see them and have it, the truth of who they are, all that stuff is excellent.
It is heartbreaking every day when we see people walk through our doors and don't have food, don't have clothing, clearly they don't have housing. They can't work on healing unless we stabilize them along the way. Why did you choose to spend your life with the poor of our society? I mean, you're a Jesuit. A lot of fellow Jesuits are university professors and high school teachers and that type of thing. What motivated you to spend your time with the poor? I always have seen people heal when they realize they can love themselves, and they realize they can love themselves when they realize God loves them, no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's what you all taught us.
Homeboy wants to be confident in the invitation that says, no, love never fails. That be confident in it. And the problem is we've lost our confidence. We go, I don't know, this sounds soft. No, it's not soft. It is the only thing that has never failed. It has never failed.
So over the years, many people have asked me, what surprised me most at Homeboy? And I could put a long list of items out there. But one of the early items that surprised me the most was handing money to people and just helping people out with cash, with your handshakes along the way. Yeah. Tell me more about that. When did you start realizing that was something that needed to happen, and why did you do that?
Well, I think sometimes we can have an aerial view that say, a job will be helpful for you. Okay, that's good. Or an education, but I always would talk to the staff in the earliest days that the love has to be concrete. So if you're, doing all the things, affirming people, holding them in high regard, you can see them and have it, the truth of who they are, all that stuff is excellent. But if they're not eating, it doesn't make all that stuff hollow, but it has to be in concert with that. Otherwise, people aren't going to be able to put one foot in front of the next. So you want, feed them. How are we going to handle the rent? How can we figure this out? Just right now, it was intractable problems, homies being kicked out of their cousin's house, And so you kind of want to say, well, okay, this wasn't his fault, And so how do we insist that we will be a net under them and promise them that you're not going to hit the ground. That's all we're going to promise you. And maybe I'm not going to be able to do all of that, but I can do this, small things with great love.
Right. And so I've seen how you hand money out, and it's no strings attached. You're not conditionally, you're not saying you have to do X, Y, and Z. Most of the rest of society has this sort of impulse to put attachments to the gifts. Can you talk about why you choose not to?
Yeah, well, you want to, when you talk about unconditional love, that you want to take that seriously. There are no conditions attached to this. Like I heard Stevie say yesterday, we're not trying to catch you. We're just trying to help you, which I thought, good. Telling somebody who's tested dirty, it's not about gotcha. It's about help ya. And so, although people have a hard time with that, but you still want to be, consistent with it. I remember Anderson Cooper in an interview said, people will say, like the cops, I think he said the cops, that gang members just take advantage of you. And then I always have said, how can somebody take my advantage if I'm giving my advantage? Years later, he did another interview, and before the interview started, he said, I use that line with my friends who say to me, people are taking advantage of you. But it's a way to kind of refigure it, because then it's like, what, are you more savvy? And then why are you giving people, money who you just don't know? Are they going to get high? Because way later on, someone will come and say, a guy came not that long ago and gave me a secret handshake. and gave me $20. And he said, because years ago, you gave me $20. And I know I don't need to pay you back, but I just want you to know that I appreciated that moment and it helped me, So, but, people on staff at Homeboy in the old days would say, oh gosh, what if he's going to use it to get high? I go, well, then it's an investment. It's an investment in his confidence in this place that I will go back here. And I think he knew I was going to use that money to get high. But now, years later, the guys come back and said, you still gave it to me anyway. So
yeah, no, listen, that's my aerial view of watching you over these years. I was in that same spot Anderson Cooper was, that, wait a minute, someone's taking advantage of you.
Yeah.
I mean, because we heard the guy talking outside your office about how he was going to tell you this story. And it always amazed me how you gave, with no attachments, just so unbound love, just going to keep giving. And over and over, I saw the over and over again to the same person. And I've come to realize that you were in a relationship saying, I trust you and we're here for you, we love you. And that maybe on the 8th, 9th time, it finally sinks in that guy in that case, it's going to change his life around.
Yeah.
And he comes back and asks for that type of help. But it took me being there a number of months and years for it to really sink in. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I know over the years, donors would be upset that you would hand money out. Clearly, government grants, you're not allowed to hand money out to people. I mean, how did you actually combat that and dialogue that through with donors?
Well, I don't think that's ever really come up with me face to face. Probably I've heard
That's true. I got to
you
hear
got
all those
it, and
stories.
other people did it. And I
Right.
go, great, talk to Tom. But,
yeah, right.
Because part of it is, it's a delicate balance, because you already know, gosh, I'm not going to give this guy $300. I might give him 40 just because I know kind of where he is, And again, it's an investment in him where they will say, you knew full well that I was not trustworthy.
Right.
And you gave me $40. Now, what he doesn't know is I didn't give him 300 because I know enough not to do that. But it's just enough. It's an investment. It says that there's something familiar about it in a sense of family, that you come back, it's no matter whatness.
Yeah. How stressful is it to actually give money away like that? Because you have now a lot of people coming to you looking for those handshakes.
It is stressful, and all the other guys who sit on my desk while I'm not here,
right.
have a kind of a modicum of that, but they still do it. And they try to access other resources too, which is hard to do sometimes. And they're better at that probably than I am. But it is frustrating because, there's no, I think donors though have a general sense of, if they give money to Homeboy, it will concretely help people. So then that's my sense.
That's nowadays, but clearly 10 years ago wasn't necessarily that way.
30 years ago, probably, or 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it wasn't, And again, those were the days, I mean, we've kind of altered how we see these things, that I was thinking this morning, gang violence, who knows how you can break that down, but violent crime is at a 60-year low. And in this city, 60 years. And, Lyndon Johnson was president and I was in the 6th grade. So I think Homeboy has contributed to that moment, truly. And because if you can parse it out and say of, violent crime, the gang violence, who knows what percentile law enforcement would apply to that. But everybody who's kind of close to the ground knows, oh yeah, this has helped change how we see gang members, how gang members have seen themselves, And then all of a sudden you're in a different place where, the criticisms of donors, say 30 years, 25 years ago, would not really be so front burner for us right now. They'd go, no, this is working. It's creating a culture.
Yeah, it's creating an investment in people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned Lyndon Johnson 60 years ago. So that's a good bridge to the way I think about some of the successes of Homeboy. And I've said this, the poverty rate in America has been the same, narrow band, 12 to 13% for the last 60 years. Really, the last time it was a measurable decrease was in the Johnson administration. But there's still 12% of our folks in our country, probably in a higher percentage in California and in LA, who live below the poverty line. And it is heartbreaking every day when we see people walk through our doors and don't have food, don't have clothing, clearly don't have housing, that they can't work on healing unless we stabilize them along the way. So let me ask you, why did you choose to spend your life with the poor of our society? I mean, you're a Jesuit. A lot of fellow Jesuits are university professors and high school teachers and that type of thing. What motivated you to spend your time with the poor?
Well, right now we had a group of college students who were in my office, and one of them asked me that question. And so everybody presumes there's a kind of a trajectory where you kind of say, oh, I see where this will be in 30 years, which of course was not true. And so I never saw myself, I think I might work with gangs. It was just because I was burying kids and I was a pastor and they were in my parish. But prior to that, I was supposed to go to Santa Clara to be a chaplain or campus minister or whatever they called them. And I had sealed the deal, basically. But then I went to Bolivia and it turned me inside out. So there was the poorest country in the hemisphere at the moment, poorer than Haiti was Bolivia. And a lot of social upheaval and political strife. And it was an eye-opener. But there was something that the poor had access to the gospel in a way that I had never experienced in my life. So at that point, I was just ordained at 84, spent 3 months at Dolores Mission as my first assignment as a priest. But then I did 84, 85 in Bolivia. So it just turned me inside out. So I was a totally different person. So when I came back, still had more studies at Berkeley, but I went, oh, wow, I can't do the Santa Clara thing, all due respect to Santa Clara. But I just have to work with the poor. So I didn't, it wasn't about going back to Bolivia.
Can you speak more about turning you inside out? So what was it that living with them? It was being in relationship with them?
In relationship with the poor. And again, my Spanish wasn't that great. Yeah. But I watched them. I watched how they suffered and how they carried their dignity and their nobility. And somehow they were pointing the way. So then when you're called upon to preach, the gospel that we all read, then you're at a point with them where you go, wow, their experience is really quite different, and that they have kind of a privileged access to something that's really unique. I don't think I've ever been able to explain it very well, except that somehow the poor are ambassadors and guides, and they say, here, walk this way.
I feel silly asking the question this way, but just for the sake of completeness. So that was your experience in Bolivia. Same experience here in America? Same experience with the poor of Los Angeles County?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. But it flowed one to the other. Different, the poverty in the projects is different than the poverty in Bolivia. And then you also have but I had a buffer year when I was studying theology, finishing my degree in theology, that there's a kind of a distaste that comes to be back in the first world after you've watched this kind of bare struggle of the poor in the third world. So I had to go through that where everything just felt, I can't live in the first world. But then my my provincial said a couple priests left Dolores Mission. This was unheard of that something like this would happen. But he said, would you mind flying home to LA every weekend and say Mass at Dolores Mission, because I had been there for 3 months. So that seemed to be it inoculated me from what I was going through, which was distaste for the first world, because it put me back in kind of the midst of people who were really poor. And so I did that for, 6 months.
So did your distaste go away because you found yourself thinking you can, I know these aren't your words, you help solve some problems, or is
no,
it
not
you
solve
just
problems, but in the presence, accompaniment.
Right,
it was about
right.
accompaniment, which was all I could do in Bolivia, because I'm not versant. I'm not, teaching a class, or, I'm barely getting through a homily, but I know that I walked with people, and that mattered. And so then I went back to Dolores Mission, and that mattered too, because they knew I was flying from Berkeley every weekend for 6 months to just help out, and so, yeah, it kind of reignited this kind of thing. And so when I finally went to my provincial, I said, please, I beg you, don't send me to Santa Clara. I can't remember if he suggested Dolores Mission or I said Dolores Mission. I can't even remember.
I guess as you said it.
Maybe I did, but I don't remember doing that. But maybe I did suggest it. I think you're right. Maybe I said, well, here's a solution to solve the problem, especially I already knew. Because
what's interesting about you do provide solutions. I've seen you at the organization. You teach people how to do solutions. You are a solution person. You are an innovator who sort of implements, but yet you don't see yourself that way.
I never see myself that way. I always, because it makes it sound like I kind of know where this is going. And most of the time I don't. I just think it's one foot in front of the next. That's how I feel most days. But that's how this organization evolved. It was not, especially when I see, some of our partners in the Global Homeboy Network, where they want to build and they're ready and they wait, and it's a chessboard where they stare at the chessboard and they don't move. And I'm kind of a, look before you leap, but leap. And that's why I get frustrated with that as a concept. So I recoil at let's really see, where do we want to go? What's our 5-year plan? I go, I have no idea. I'm trying to get through Friday, But then it keeps you anchored in the present moment with what is it that we need to deal with? Tattoo removal. I wouldn't have seen that coming. Okay, let's do that. And how about school? And how about GED and therapy? Maybe there's amenability now that hadn't been present before. Those things just evolved. It wasn't like, strategic planning, which
but you just
people have to do.
You have this zeal to sort of help solve people's problems, their challenges. You're going to leap to make that happen.
And with intractable problems, which I had 9 of them this morning, is you go, well, let's just do one thing, because nobody owns a magic wand. And you have intractable problems here. So maybe we can handle the housing piece today, or make progress on it anyway.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how, and all hands on deck, because it was beautiful. Stevie came in, and then Puka came in, and we think we got this, and all right, this is great. And this guy burst into tears, which is hard in my office because
windows all around.
All windows and glass, and everybody's looking in. And of course, he doesn't want to turn around. And he just burst into tears because, a huge thing got solved, as you would say. It got solved, by everybody. I think we can pull from here. I think we can get that grant. I think there's an opening now. And it was beautiful.
Yep.
Like a symphony, really.
Yeah, Homeboy's about bringing tangible resources to people while they heal.
That's right.
And I always have seen people heal when they realize they can love themselves, and they realize they can love themselves when they realize God loves them no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's what you all taught us. Go back to, though, your time in Bolivia. You got turned inside out. You said that how the folks there were sort of good ambassadors to spirituality, or guides into seeing God. What do you say to everybody who hasn't had that experience of spending time with people who are poor in our society? How can they get that same learning and feeling?
Well, they can do it by proximity, so you do have to kind of put yourself there, which you can do anywhere. You don't have to go to Bolivia. You can come to Homeboy, which is kind of what happens. We, whatever we had prior to COVID, maybe 350 volunteers. It was a palpable experience of just a taste of the struggle, or what do people have to carry. And so once they kind of see it and feel it a little bit, that's all you need, but that's what Brian Stevenson always talks about, is the vicinity. That's kind of what you have to do. Put yourself there first, and then that's life-changing. Then your heart is altered. That's why I'm less anxious to have people do things, although I was just talking earlier about concrete things. Mm-hmm. It'll become concrete. But initially, it's just listen, love. Initially, it's just receive people. And then, that's when you have the people saying, oh my God, I've gotten so much more out of being here than I feel I've given. Yes, that's the goal, really.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, people learn compassion, and they learn there's people out there struggling, and they should help and will help. But where does spirituality and God fit into that? I mean, how does people make that leap to a better ambassador, a better advocate?
Yeah. When it comes to spirituality, it gets so compartmentalized, Like, I remember I was giving a retreat to men, not from Homeboy, and one guy says, I just want to be more spiritual. And I said, don't stop, catch yourself, because it becomes a compartment rather than organic and part of the air you breathe. And so that's kind of, I think, how it happens, because you want to stay anchored in the present moment, listening to people, loving people, honoring people, and it feels passive. But it isn't passive, because folks who are unfamiliar with their own nobility inhabit it in your presence just because you're receiving them, because you're listening to them. It's not like, I probably should be giving more advice. No, don't give advice. Listen, receive them, and watch what happens. People go, wow. They will have a palpable experience of inhabiting their own dignity and their own nobility. So it becomes relational wholeness, which is the goal, really. But then people walk away and go, wow, this volunteer who's an old white man, retired, he listened to me. He knows my name. He knows where to find me. He checks up on me. It doesn't get better than that. I mean, that's the whole thing. So, but the problem comes when we go, now I'm going to do the spiritual part. This is what happened in the Bush administration when the faith, what did they call it? It was some kind of faith component that had never been introduced before, and God love them. And the whole group of people from George W. Bush's team came, and we had a long meeting. And I spent on and on, about all the things we do at Homeboy in those days. And then I finished, and they kind of made a face, and they said, yeah, well, I don't know, what about the spiritual part? Of course, how this would push my buttons.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I said, oh, that's funny. I just thought I just spent the last 20 minutes talking about the spiritual part, which is to say tattoo removal, accompaniment, job placement, social enterprises. We only had few in those days. I thought I was talking about the spiritual part. So that's kind of a little bugaboo for me, because I think we tend to do that. Now let's do the spiritual part. Because people say that too about Homeboy. Why aren't you talking about God or Jesus or prayer and I go, the whole thing's a prayer. I don't think that's a cop-out. I think that's the truth.
That's true. Well, I was talking to my spiritual director this week, and again, I get in my head all the time on this stuff, and he kind of paused me and said, Tom, God is all about experience.
Yeah.
It's not about thinking something through. You're experiencing God.
Yeah.
And that's what happens at Homeboy for sure.
And maybe it's about naming it after you've experienced it, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's not essential. It's having the experiences. It helps sometimes.
And opening your eyes and opening your heart to let the experience come in for you, right?
I mean, it helps if you can go to your head too a little bit and say, oh, that was an experience of compassion, or I was able to leave, no greater love than this, than to lay down your life. I'm going to set my weirdness and anxiety por un lado to the side so I can be present. And then you go, oh, that's what that means, to lay down your life.
Right.
I always thought it meant death, but maybe it's everything short of that as well, where you're not so self-absorbed, you're really connecting to the needs of the other person. So all that stuff, it's hard to parcel it out. It's hard to separate it because it's meant to be that joined, I think.
Yeah. And so to make it a little bit more concrete, although your answer was in place before this, when you sort of ask people to move themselves to be in relationship with folks on the margins of our society, what's the advice? How to make that happen? What's the mindset you need going into that? Well,
you have to kind of be willing to find yourself in the vicinity of people who are poor and on the margins and excluded. So that always seems a guide for me, because I always use that thing about, stand with the poor, powerless, and voiceless. Okay, find them. Stand with the easily despised and readily lift out. Okay, where are they? Stand with the demonized. Stand with the disposable. Where are you going to find them? So people, those are guideposts, and people go, I'm going to go to the jails. I'm going to go to, an AIDS clinic or a hospice or whatever, Then people feel, once they buy that and say, that's where we're being called to stand. So I always talk about Ignatius in the meditation of the two standards, where Ignatius says in his spiritual exercises, see Jesus standing in the lowly place. And every word in that sentence is about, you're watching him. He's not saying, get your ass over to the lowly place. It just says, see him standing there. And then it makes you go, why is he standing there? What is he finding there? How does he feel being there? And then you go, oh, that's where the joy is. He's not indicting.
Mm-hmm.
His whole presence he's not even saying, come on in, the water's fine. You just see him standing there. That's enough. That's pure invitation. It's not get your ass over to the poor. It's no, that's where he is. And then the more you kind of grow and you say, oh, I want to stand where he stands. And then you know why he's standing there, because this is where it's in the lowly place. That's the invitation to people. Come to the lowly place. It doesn't have to be Homeboy. Mm-hmm. It can be a soup kitchen. It can be whatever brings you to the place where people have to carry more than I've ever had to carry, And then you find their extraordinary gifts. It's not a romanticizing of the poor. It feels like that's what you're saying. But it's really about people who manage to know the truth of who they are in the midst of unspeakable things and horrible trauma, as we always see at Homeboy.
Yeah. So the word poor gets, I think, misunderstood and misused. And I'm guilty of that quite a bit. But in the Beatitudes, the poor will inherit the earth. Can you sort of reframe that to sort of how you just
it's about the even in the Old Testament, you have the covenant that says, as I have loved you, everybody in the world is expecting God to say, love me back. But doesn't. Says, as I have loved you, so must you have a special preferential love for the widow, orphan, and the stranger. So those were the categories of basically the folks who were kind of in an up against moment. But you could replace them with prisoners, gang members, people who are addicted. The list is long, but those were the categories: widow, orphan, stranger. And a huge insight into the kind of God we have who isn't like us, love me back, is perfectly free enough to say, no, I'm okay. Look after the widow, orphan, and the stranger. Right. And even we think with widow, it's like, well, no, widows are kind of, people feel good about a widow.
Why in the Beatitudes is he saying the widow, orphan, and stranger inherit the earth?
Yeah.
The last will come first. What's the point of that?
Well, the point, I think, is to stand in the lowly places. That's the invitation we lost sight of. The church decided, well, invitation isn't going to fill churches. Indictment might. You're going to go to hell. That might work. And it's too bad because it also underscores a human thing, which is we're not confident in the invitation. And Homeboy wants to be confident in the invitation that says, no, love never fails. That be confident in it. And the problem is we've lost our confidence. We go, I don't know, this sounds soft. No, it's not soft. It is the only thing that has never failed. It has never failed.
Period. Yep.
Now, it happens that we don't try it because we're we look before we leap in. We don't leap into the love arena, where you can say, yeah, I'm confident in this. In the end, I know in the end, this will prevail. But we lose our way as we go. We go, no, how about we indict instead of invite? And there we're off to the races again, But so that's the idea, I think.
Thank you. So Richard Rohr, Father Richard Rohr, is a friend of yours. He runs the Center for Contemplation and Action in New Mexico, and he writes a lot of books as well. So his latest book, Tears of Things, he's got 2 lines I want to read to you and get you to respond to it. Jesus' message of good news is not likely to be sought after or heard by the comfortable and secure, but by the poor, the captives, the blind, and the oppressed, which fully explains Jesus' behavior throughout the rest of his ministry. That's number 1. Number 2 is neither Jesus nor the suffering servant sought failure for its own sake, but they did seek what such a perspective uniquely teaches, that the rejected and silenced ones always expose what the culture actually idealized. And so why I underline these 2 lines is because with my time at Homeboy, I just was observing our population and just seeing what they suffered under, and then how society kind of looks past their sufferings. And yet the folks we serve want to be like the rest of society, but not really as caring as they are. And so these 2 lines spoke to me. What do you take out of these 2 sections?
I don't know. I always I love Richard, and I love those quotes, and I love this book, which I just finished. But, I always get nervous about anything that's going to enhance us and them, that, even to say, like I'm uncomfortable with the poor have access to this and the rich don't have access to this. Well, anytime we're in a kind of a dualistic mindset, who are good, who are bad, who is us, who is them, who are the goats, who are the sheep, I don't believe in that stuff. I really don't. Because I think we always want to find a language that says the invitation is for everybody. Now, that doesn't take the preferential care and love away from the poor because the poor are guiding us. But it doesn't mean that other folks don't have access. Like, because there's a sense of that. It's hard, as the gospel says, for rich people to kind of enter, and so you have the rich guy in Lazarus, and he's con zapatos y todos, or this Mexican saying that he's going to heaven with his shoes on and everything, But you still want to say the invitation's for everybody, and that's important. And for people who have means, you want them to see Jesus standing in the lowly place because you want them to appreciate, why God has said widow, orphan, and stranger. Mm-hmm. And Jesus has done the same. But it doesn't mean that, Jesus is eating at dinner at a big donor's house, and they go, wow, how can you do that? The Pharisees are saying, because not only is he a big donor, he's a big sinner. He's a tax collector. Mm. And Jesus says, well, I don't know. Doctors come for people who are sick. So he changed it. They want to talk about sin. He wants to talk about, health. And that's different. So then it becomes more us as opposed to us and them. That's my only kind of quibble, because I get afraid of drawing the lines of the people who have access or who don't have access.
No, that's fair enough to quibble. And with that, there's still a lot of poor people out there who society kind of leaves behind.
Yeah.
And have different challenges and struggles. Let me kind of turn, though, because what I've seen out of our homeboy population, and which I would consider poor, I mean, they're lowest end of the economic spectrum, right? They come out of prison, have debt, no money, no place to live. I've been amazed with the generosity of our folks. Can you talk about that? And you have one or two stories you can just highlight how authentically generous and grateful our people are.
Yeah, I mean, if people have nothing to give the most, I mean, it's just they're the most generous people. I remember even in being pastor, you'd get the collection, and it was one of the ways that we redeemed the poorest parish in the city is because we didn't have enough to run the school or the parish. So you got what you could, in the collection. And then there would be an earthquake in Mexico, and you'd have a second collection for the people who were suffering in Mexico. That always happened. And you go, oh my God, this was so much money that people gave. And that they couldn't afford to give it. So, and that kind of thing happened at Homeboy all the time. People are always bending over backwards to kind of help folks, especially in times of funeral expenses or whatever it is, and sometimes you think, oh no, this is not practical.
Right. Hold on to your money. Don't give me that much money.
To be this generous, you can't really afford to do it. But it's also a kind of somehow it'll all work out, and somehow it all does, But without question, absolutely the most generous human beings on the planet are the poor. Always have been, because they know what it's like. They know what the struggle is. And they don't kind of plan it out like I can afford to give this amount, as maybe a rich person might say. You think they could give way more, which they probably could, but they have it more planned, But the poor don't plan. They just go, all we have is today, and so they operate accordingly.
Mm. So from your early days in Bolivia to now and seeing people struggle who don't have the resources, has it ever shaken your faith in, I guess, God, that we have so many people who are suffering?
Yeah, I think that it never does, as weird as that is. Somebody emailed me today talking about, I just don't get it. How is God powerful when these horrible things happen? And, we think the dichotomy is God all powerful or is God all loving? And I think that the power is the loving. That's the power. And so, but this person was going on, kind of saying, people who've been raped and abused and tortured and traumatized, and that God's just looking in on this. So, I'm of the school that says, God protects me from nothing and sustains me in everything. And so the sustenance, which is, kind of the love, it's God hoping that we'll all do the loving thing. But otherwise, things are random, totally random. Mm-hmm. Again, I had somebody in my office right now, a donor, kind of saying, well, I know God is for a reason, has put me here. And I just don't think it's how it works. I think God is too busy loving us to have a plan for us. But it's also, the world is spinning and it's random and haphazard. And it takes me back to the day of women, mothers screaming, horrible screaming, in church when their son, I'm bearing her son. And why did God take my son? And you go, whoa, yep. God didn't take your son. And that's a hard one to unpack. Some pobrecito with a gun took your son. And how do we roll up our sleeves so we can help that kid and kids like him never do this again? But God has nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing to do with it. And so that's hard for people. Even this woman who was writing me today, I said, I don't know how else to say it. I just think, we are invited to move beyond to a sense of God. It has to be enough that we are sustained. And then nobody can touch you. Oh, except for death. That's good. No, not even death. Well, except for torture. No, because once you discover that there are fates worse than death, and not knowing the God who loves us and hopes for tenderness and kinship,
So we've been posting on our social media platforms that we're having this podcast. And so we asked for some questions. And one of the questions a little bit touched on what we just were talking about in terms of faith and faith being shaken. So the question is, what's your go-to method for dealing with life when things seem hopeless?
Well, I never feel hopeless. Yeah. Sometimes I feel less than optimistic, but I never feel hopeless ever. And people always talk about things that shake my faith. I always feel like, oh no, this is shaping my faith. It's not shaking it. So, because the premise of it is not a thing that I really do, but it's asking for go-to method, which is return to the present moment, like the monks, ancient monks who, when they were stressed and anxious and fearful, they just said this one word over again. And the word wasn't God and the word wasn't Jesus. The word was today. And so they would say the word today, and it did one thing, anchored them here in the present moment. And that's the only way. We're saved in the present moment. So that, I suppose, if there's a technique, that's my go-to. Stay here. Don't go somewhere else. Don't go to the scenario that your mind is conjuring. Stay exactly here. And then all of a sudden you can delight in the person in front of you. This is really hard, I think. I find it hard, because cherishing is easy. Remembering to cherish is really hard. So you have to be called back to that moment. That's kind of what the today thing does. It really keeps you with whoever you're with.
Yeah. What about burnout? A lot of people come to us at Homeboy, and because knowing that you've done it for 37 years and some of our staff has done it for 15 and 20 years, and particularly other nonprofit organizations, and they're dealing with people on the margins of society. There's not enough resources to go around. It creates stress and burnout. I've heard you talk about how you finally learned to deal with burnout and that you don't do burnout any longer.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I give this answer a lot because I'm asked this question a lot, everywhere. And you can even distill it down to things that you hear, like at a commencement address. Go out there, graduates, and make a difference. And if I'm speaking at the same graduation, I'm going to go out there and say, no, don't do that. Because if that's what you're going to do, and then that by definition will have to be about you. It can't be about you. But if you go to the margins so that the folks there make you different, well, now we're talking. This is about us, and that keeps you from burnout, because I kind of don't believe in it. And I feel badly because I remember once a woman I think I had just met, and she asked me to write a blurb for her book on burnout, how to take care of yourself. So I went, I don't believe in it, but oh well. So I wrote something.
You wouldn't even say no there. That's the time you should have said no.
I should have said no, but I went, okay, and she's writing a book. And so I said the best I could. But I kind of don't believe it, because I think if you're burning out, you've allowed this to become about you. Because if you allow your heart to be altered by the poor, then it's about us. And now, oh my God, I can't wait to come to work. It doesn't mean that it's magically not difficult anymore. Yeah, frustrating, exasperating.
Yep.
Disappointment. But I also don't do disappointment, because it's like, no, in the same way, like with praise and blame, it all's water off a duck's back. Somebody says, oh my God, you're a saint. Oh my God, you're the greatest. And I go, ooh, off the duck's back. Or I think you're, crazy or bad or whatever. And you go, that has to be off the duck's back too. So
wonderful wisdom and insight. But that's what I want to ask the question. When did you actually figure that out? Was it just 5 years ago, 30 years ago?
No,
what caused you to figure that one out?
I don't know what caused it. It was like, this was also in the early days when Homeboy was reviled, and I along with it. So you had to go, you go, how do you process that stuff? Oh my God, people hate me. Oh my God, think I'm part of the problem and not part of the solution. People said this a lot. And then you kind of go, well, here's what I think is good and true and right and just. Okay, I'm going to stay there. And then, but also people were saying, oh my God, it must be hard and how wonderful. And, it just right now, again, in the office, people are saying stuff, and I go, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's water off a duck's back, because otherwise you don't cling. You can't cling to praise or to blame. And again, it keeps you moving on, and it's okay. It's not about me. It keeps you where you need to be in terms of your anchor and your grounding, otherwise. But then it's fixing, solving, that's why you were talking about solving earlier. And I have a little bit of, I'm not fixing, solving anything. I don't save anybody. I always say that.
How about troubleshooting?
Yeah, that's good. That works. Right. Yeah. I mean, I like how that worked today with this kid who suddenly lost his housing. You're all hands on deck. I like that. I like that part of it. I hate step aside, let me handle this, because that's not who we are, and though
sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah, well, sometimes you do. And sometimes, you recoil at it. Good. You should recoil at that, because bring people in, allies. How can we, I'll do this part, you do that part, that's what you want.
Great. All right. Thank you.